In the trailer for Ridley Scott's upcoming Gladiator II, there's a big fight in Rome's most famous arena, the Colosseum. Our new hero, played by Mescal, has to face the craziest challenges. Wild sea battles, a fierce promoter, that's Denzel Washington, and even a rampaging rhino. But how much of this really happened back in the days of ancient Rome? Let's dig in. First things first, did gladiators really fight rhinos? Well, sort of. History says there was a rhino at the Colosseum's opening in 80 AD, but it didn't go up against people. Instead, it fought other animals, like bulls and lions. Romans loved to watch animals battle. It was like watching the ultimate animal showdown. But here's the twist. Gladiators weren't the ones fighting these beasts. That job belonged to special hunters called venationes. And yes, the Romans loved their exotic animals. They even shipped them from faraway places like Africa to show off Rome's power. They'd bring in elephants, lions, and yes, sometimes rhinos, just for the thrill of the show. The big deal was to see these wild animals fight each other, and sometimes they'd even serve the meat to the crowd. Next, we've got the epic sea battles, or naumachia, that you see in the trailer. Did those happen? Well, believe it or not, yes, kind of. The Romans were super smart with engineering. They could actually flood the Colosseum for special shows. It was rare and only for big events, but it happened. These battles weren't exactly gladiator fights, though. They were staged wars with boats and a ton of soldiers. Some say the Colosseum even had a sea battle at its grand opening. You might have heard gladiators shout, "Hail, Emperor! We who are about to die salute you." But guess what? That's not really a gladiator thing. That line was actually shouted by soldiers in one of these water battles. They'd say it to the emperor before their epic fight. So in Gladiator II, when you hear that line, know it came from the watery wars, not the regular arena fights. Now let's talk about the thumb signals. Thumbs up, thumbs down, the stuff of life and death. If a gladiator was defeated, the crowd decided his fate with hand signs. But it wasn't as simple as you think. If the crowd wanted the gladiator to live, they'd show a closed fist, or pollice compresso. But if they wanted him to die, they'd give the pollice verso, which just meant turning the thumb. No one knows which direction. There's this old painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme that shows a thumbs down from Vestal virgins, and somehow that idea just stuck. Gladiator fights weren't just mindless violence, though. The gladiators were valuable assets. Promoters paid a fee for them to fight and didn't want to waste their investment. That's why the final decisions sometimes lay with the promoter or the emperor, especially if the crowd was going wild. So, thumbs up or thumbs down, Rome's fights were a bit more complicated than just life or death. So, did gladiators really face rhinos? Did they really fight in sea battles? The answer is a little yes and a little no. Hollywood loves to add some extra spice, but the real Roman arena had plenty of thrills on its own. And with Gladiator II, it's bound to be an epic ride. Just remember, real history had some twists that even the movies can't quite capture.